Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and recently Mr. Adams sent us a message asking us which organization was better at hunting down the Jedi, the Inquisitors or the Imperial Shadow Guard. Now, we're not really well versed in this matter, so we figured why not do some research and then make a video. So today we're going to be breaking down each Jedi hunting organization and their strengths and weaknesses, and then we'll be asking you for your opinion on which organization is stronger in a poll at the end of this video. So stay tuned. So let's start with the Inquisitors, the canon Jedi hunting organization most commonly seen in the Rebels cartoon TV show, along with the excellent Darth Vader Dark Lord of the Sith comic series, and also in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which is promised to be the most anti-EA game in EA history. The Inquisitors was a special program consisting of Force-sensitive individuals whose main job was to hunt down the remaining Jedi who had escaped Order 66. Despite their immense amount of skill and deadliness in combat, they were never deployed for any other mission than hunting down the Jedi. Such was the overwhelming fear that Palpatine had that the Jedi Order might one day rise up and challenge him again. The Inquisitors were all former Jedi who had turned to the dark side after Order 66. The leader of the Inquisitors, the Grand Inquisitor, was a Padawan who had formerly been a member of the Jedi Temple Guard. His duty was not only to protect the Jedi Order, but also, ironically, to hunt down rogue Jedi who had gone to the dark side. The other members of the Inquisitors were a variety of Padawan, Jedi Knights, and Jedi Masters, the most famous of which were named the 10 brothers and sisters. Besides just hunting down their former Jedi, the Inquisitors also had a second initiative, which was to find and secure Force-sensitive children for training as future Inquisitors or servants for the Empire. They also ran Project Harvesters, which looked for potential Force-sensitives in the Imperial Academy system. Most Inquisitors were trained by Darth Vader. The former Clone Wars hero and Jedi Knight was a brutal, if not efficient, teacher and expected only the best from his pupils. Many of the brothers and sisters lost limbs during their training sparring with the Sith Lord as a result. This prompted the Grand Inquisitor to question the methods of Darth Vader, to which he responded that these former Jedi had to abandon their defensive-minded lightsaber training and adopt a more aggressive Sith combat form. While Vader was an excellent swordsman, whether he was a Jedi or a Sith, he had only become a Sith Lord a few months ago, and while his raw power and emotions allowed him to successfully tap into the dark side, he didn't really have the experience to train other dark side users into fully embracing the Sith Order. And as a result, most of the former Jedi and the Inquisitors were quite weak in the dark side of the Force. The decapitation and injuries Vader inflicted on them was an attempt to teach them how to embrace loss and use it to fuel their anger, something he was very familiar with. The power of each individual Inquisitor really varied. As we said before, some were just Padawan, others were full-blown Masters or combat specialists. And like all Force-sensitive individuals, they all excelled naturally in certain areas. For instance, the 9th sister was an empath and able to easily read other beings' emotions. The 10th brother was blind and had great hearing and intuition. The 5th brother was a muscular individual who relied on power and brute force in his lightsaber attacks. But due to their lack of training in the dark side of the Force, very few of the Inquisitors were really proficient in dark side Force powers. As a matter of fact, few of the Inquisitors were even all that impressive using base Force skills like telekinesis. The Grand Inquisitor was perhaps the most powerful of the bunch and was quite proficient in Form 2, Makasi. This was a combat form specially designed for dueling other lightsaber-wielding combatants, a form favored by Count Dooku and Asajj Ventress. The Grand Inquisitor was also quite proficient with telekinesis and able to pull off powerful mind tricks and mind probes for interrogation. Most of the Inquisitors were equipped in robes, and many of them wore combat armor, perhaps to hide any deficiencies they had in combat. As we mentioned before, many of the Inquisitors were missing limbs or other body parts, which were oftentimes replaced by prosthetics. Many of the Inquisitors also wore helmets, ranging from the full helmet that the second sister, one of the antagonists from the Fallen Order video game, wore, to a more open-faced helmet that the Seventh Sister wore. The Grand Inquisitor wore special protection over his ears because his species had hypersensitive hearing. However, the most recognizable piece of equipment that almost all of the Inquisitors used was the double-bladed spinning lightsaber. These were ferocious blades that could provide a very reliable defensive shell for the user, but also quickly overwhelm a single blade-wielding Jedi. Although it should be noted that the 10th brother dual-wielded 2 single lightsabers. The Inquisitors were also known for using a variety of different gadgets, from stun grenades to security and probe droids. The Inquisitors generally always had the entire might of the Empire behind them. Their mission was an incredibly important one, and they were usually given command of whatever troops they deemed necessary for a mission. This also meant that they could retask units they run into in the field and assign them to their own mission. The Inquisitors also had specialized purge troopers, elite clone troopers who specialized in fighting Force sensitives. Generally, the Inquisitors didn't work alone and were deployed with other Inquisitors. Because of the dark side nature of the Inquisitors, this meant that the sisters and brothers were always competing against each other, sometimes to the detriment of the mission. Although some Inquisitors did have genuine friendships with each other. Most of the time when encountering Jedi, the Inquisitors would use their advantage in personnel and resources to corner a Jedi and then take them down at close range with their lightsabers. Some of the Inquisitors were perhaps a bit too eager to engage the Jedi in melee combat, which basically negated any of their advantages. The Inquisitors were generally more proficient than your average Jedi Padawan, some Jedi Knights, and even some Jedi Masters. Their aggressive combat techniques and the fact that they hunted in pairs made them quite dangerous. Most of the Inquisitors were also quite good trackers, and even if they encountered an especially dangerous foe like Maul or Ahsoka Tano, they could usually call in reinforcements from the Empire to support them. Despite the advantage that the dark side gave to combatants, the majority of the Inquisitors didn't really have the powers and capabilities of a true Sith. They're more like Dark Jedi and incapable of taking full advantage of all those dark side powers that a Sith Lord would have. And because of just how efficient Order 66 was, most of the surviving Jedi had to be quite formidable combatants to have been able to escape. This meant that the Inquisitors were oftentimes outmatched, especially after the easier to catch and less capable Jedi were cut down. The Inquisitors also were still technically Jedi in the eyes of clone troopers. This was especially problematic when one Jedi Master triggered Order 66 somehow, causing a group of purge troopers to turn against their Inquisitor leaders. Next up is the Emperor's Shadow Guard from Legends. They are most predominantly featured in the Star Wars Force Unleashed video game. This was an elite special operations unit that served with the Emperor's Royal Guard. They served directly underneath Emperor Palpatine himself and were used to hunt down suspected Jedi and Force users. Now, very little is known about their origins, but there are 2 main theories. One is that the Emperor's Shadow Guard were actually Force-sensitive soldiers that were formerly a part of the Sun Guard. The Sun Guard was a Sith mercenary group that at one time rivaled the Mandalorians in power and status. They were even originally considered as a template for the Clone Army. The Sun Guard specialized in commando operations and hand-to-hand combat. Their signature weapon was the pike. They had also served as Darth Plagueis' personal guard and henchmen at one point in time. They were then inherited by Darth Sidious, who eventually turned them into his royal guard. The Force-sensitive individuals in the Sun Guard were rumored to have become the Shadow Guard. The other theory was that the Shadow Guard was made up of former Jedi Knights who fell into the dark side after Order 66. The Shadow Guard were personally trained and sometimes supervised by Darth Vader. Unlike the Inquisitors, the Shadow Guards were known for their uniformity and discipline. It was very hard to tell one Shadow Guard from another, and they all generally had the same level of skill when it came to lightsaber combat or Force powers. Unlike the Inquisitors, the Shadow Guard could use a wider range of Force powers, including Force Lightning, Force Choke, and Force Maelstrom. All of these were quite devastating attacks and very hard to defend against, especially if a Jedi has no training against any Sith combatants. Although it should be noted that the Shadow Guard's command of Force Lightning is nowhere near as powerful as a true Sith Lord's Sith Lightning. The Shadow Guard were equipped very similarly to the Royal Guard, except their armor was black instead of red. Their armor was generally considered more durable and effective than Stormtrooper armor. The Shadow Guards mainly used the lightsaber pike in combat. This was a unique weapon that gave the user a longer reach. They also were equipped with a heavy blaster pistol like their Royal Guard brethren. Some Shadow Guards could also cloak themselves with stealth devices. The Shadow Guard functioned more like a military organization rather than irregulars or assassins. They oftentimes commanded units of Royal Guardsmen or Stormtroopers into battle and were fully capable of using small unit tactics and combined arms to defeat an enemy. They were quite proficient in duels and one-on-one melee battles, but that wasn't always their first course of action. The Shadow Guard preferred tactics over glory. The Shadow Guard lacked the individuality and ambition that the Inquisitors had, which meant that they always put the mission first, which made them very scary and brutally rational opponents. Also, the lightsaber pike was quite an unusual weapon, and most Force users weren't used to fighting against one. It provided the Shadow Guard increased range and defense, which could make up for a guardsman's lack of skill. This would allow reinforcements to catch up and surround a fugitive Jedi. Their uniformity was also their greatest weakness. Standardization made them very predictable. Whereas the Inquisitors varied in quality, all the Shadow Guards proved to be far weaker than a Force user like Starkiller. Although in all fairness, Starkiller was an exceptionally powerful individual. So there you have it, guys. That's our breakdown of the Imperial Shadow Guard and the Inquisitors. I think the Inquisitors have a much wider range of proficiency and effectiveness, which can make them either less or more dangerous than an individual Shadow Guardsman. But what I do like about the Shadow Guardsmen is that they make a better military organization because of the standardization and discipline. But let me know what you think in the poll in our top right corner. Also, let me know what you think in detail in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.